Dynamic teaching lies the element of participation. This element is probably the most substantive. It's the biggest. It's the question of how we fully engage our students intellectually and emotionally in the challenges of our courses.
They're way back at the end.
He always throws a ball around. I think that keeps you alert, for sure. It also keeps you on task, wanting to answer the questions, wanting to have feedback, and keeps you in the present.
The ball is fun because, you know, I work in the sport, health, and physical education department, so we're very kinesthetic. So, you know, we don't want to drop that ball. It's sort of like, and when you've got the ball, you've got the power, and so it just adds some class management. And so not everybody's yelling out. That just sort of lightens the mood. It adds an element of play. And
what works for you? What things about the sorts of things that Guy does that really click with your own learning style?
Not feeling intimidated in front of your teacher, like your teacher knows everything and is kind of talking down to you, or not feeling scared to ask a question because no question is a stupid question. And Guy makes sure that you know no question is a stupid question.
Another thing that I've learned from my wife, from other teachers, is that sometimes I don't need to have all the answers. It's quite freeing as a teacher, and so sometimes they'll ask a question, and if they ask that question and I don't have the answer, it's, why don't you go find out?
When he says he doesn't know something, he doesn't leave it at that. He'll write it down and he'll get back to you the next class. He'll say, oh right, we talked about this last class, somebody mentioned this, and he always brings it back up. Yeah. So he finds us the answers that we're looking for.
Or he also encourages us to find our answers ourselves.
Yeah. As Guy switches up between lecture and then question answer and then puts it over to pair share, he gives you a chance to talk about that. How's that important for each of your learning styles?
It's interactive. Everyone feels like they have a part in the class, that their input is valuable.
He uses a lot of visuals, a lot of Moodle, a lot of stuff going up, chalkboard, different. What kinds of things work for you with that?
Having the slides. He posts them on Moodle. You can print them off before class, and then I'm not sitting there trying to write my notes. I can focus on my instructor. And I know some teachers don't believe in putting the slides on Moodle because students don't have to come to class. They can just get it off the internet. But for us, it's just that much easier that I can pay attention to Guy and what he's teaching me versus trying to write down everything that he's putting up.
Yeah.
And there is a difference between someone who learns through listening and someone who is a visual learner. I'm a visual learner, so I need to look at the slides and maybe have them in front of me, print it off ahead of time, and jot notes next to it. And I think that's a valuable tool.
I use the visual media because it's new, it's novel, it grabs their attention, and it really is effective for visual learners. And it generates some interest and discussion, and I mean that's what we want. We want to talk about things, we want to discuss things.
Borrowing a graph as a genre. Well, I like to take things that I think are outside their usual frames of reference, so sort of provoke them a bit or interest them. They wouldn't normally see this kind of thing in the media that they access.
One thing that Marshall does that I think is great is he really brings in like other religions, other countries' point of view, and shows us artists from India and from Pakistan.
I try to bring in fresh material all the time that I'm still discovering and exploring, and I don't always have the questions. I think that it helps when I don't know what the answers are, and so that when I ask questions, they are genuine questions.
I was very interested in your observation, Jody, about it probably came from the States. I just assumed that it came from Egypt or from Iraq or someplace.
I get very uncomfortable when I feel like I'm just asking rote questions to the things I already know about, and students are looking at me like, well, who should be guessing first here, you know? And rather than people who, in that class, I felt like people jumped in because they really did want to contribute to the conversation.
He really attempts to interact with all of the students in the class in like a big discussion. He likes having everyone involved.
He's definitely a different kind of teacher, and the evidence is there when you see the students interacting with him, and it's lively, and it's engaging, and it's fast-paced, and it seems that there's passion. The whole time that you're there, it's a constant conversation. You're part of the lecture, you're part of the teaching style, you're adding to with what you know, and then somebody else says something, and so it's not just Marshall teaching, it's the students teaching.
How does Marshall get you to feel comfortable about offering your perspective amongst many different perspectives? Lots of crossfire of ideas.
Part of it has to do with he really treats the students like adults. And it feels completely genuine. So there's no thinking that he's just trying to make you feel like, you're one of him, or you're his colleague, or you're his friend, or his teacher. You are.
I'm always being surprised by how much they already are familiar with, and in fact, it becomes quite exciting then to say, well, tell us all more about that, and my own knowledge of a particular subject gets easily surpassed by the collective knowledge of the classroom.
My guess is that I've probably convinced you of this test just by drawing a few pictures. If you'd like a more rigorous mathematical argument, I can give that to you, but of course I need the mean value theorem. We get used to thinking of mathematics as, well, it's a bunch of formulas, it's just a bunch of rules, and it's not. It's this whole thing that was developed by people. And some of them are interesting characters, right? And we have 2,000 years of history to draw on. And so there's an incredibly rich kind of history there. And I found, that's another thing I found, that if you can put that human side to it, the students always react to that.
Think of math, you go in there, you sit down, it's dreary, you learn about numbers. You go into his class, it's full of sunshine, everybody's happy, everybody has stories to tell, and he's always smiling.
In a lot of ways, I'm, fairly traditional kind of blackboard lecturer, and within that framework, it's nice to have a variety of things happening, right, whatever that is. Whatever works. I've been known to draw pictures, I've been known to use different props, I've been known to run around the classroom, and I'll do whatever I think it needs to be done in order to convey the idea at hand, right?
Yes.
And I think the more I vary that, the more the students stay engaged.
He's jumping around from board to board, rubbing things off, dropping chalk, looking back, and writing when he's not looking, and making faces. It's
using
really
real life examples like, oh, if I drop this chalk, it's going to get faster. Or, oh, I'm a ladder, I'm leaning against the wall, can you calculate the angle I'm at,
Does it make you feel lazy watching him?
Kind of makes me a little tired.
One of the things that got my attention when I was in university was that sometimes the first time I saw something, I didn't really quite get it all. I got a bit of it. I got a little piece of it. And the more and more I saw it, the more and more it started to sink in. And so in all of my courses, I've always tried to build this idea of reminding ourselves constantly what we've been doing and why we've been doing it, and just kind of sort of we keep cycling back to take a second look at it.
He gives us like a quiz of everything that we did throughout the week at the end of the week, and I think it's really great because I actually like for myself, I would never go back on Monday's work and review it or anything, but having a test makes me go and review it, and that makes me understand it more, and so it keeps me on top of things.
I don't like jumping steps in a solution very much. I found every time I've ever started to jump steps, somebody immediately asks, what just happened?
And when it came to simple little questions that I thought I was so incredibly stupid for not knowing, I'd ask him, and he'd take it totally in stride. He wouldn't say, oh, why don't you know this, or you should practice this more. He'd be like, oh, you do it this way, this is how you do it. He'd explain it to me so I wouldn't feel like such a loser for coming in and asking such a simple question.
I always at some point like to point out to my students that there are problems I do not know how to solve, that there are problems that nobody knows how to solve. There's so much that we don't know, and I think it's important for the students to start realizing that there is still a lot to be done.